So for this project, we decided to look at the school building.
We will begin by analyzing how our building's history is remembered, and we will explore how the school's architecture plays a role in influencing the way students interact and use spaces in the school.
First, let's look at how the building's past is remembered. I think it's best to start at the beginning of the school's recorded history in order to find this out.
Right, so let's analyze what has already been recorded about Northern Highlands Foundation.
Well, while I was doing the research on this, I came across a book on the history of Allendale, and it said that in 1962, Allendale and the Prusetta River joined forces to establish a new regional high school. So we can place the establishment of the school in 1962.
And in the same book, it says that the school was approved in 1963 and the area for the school was acquired the same year.
Okay, now we can start looking at the architecture itself and how that is remembered. So I have a picture of a concept painting of the school that was in the first issue of the school's yearbook. From this picture, we can see that the original building is less than half of what we know today. Despite that, the road, the parking lots, the rock wall, and the field are all present and, for the most part, unchanged. Now my question is, why hasn't there been any significant change to the original building's design since this painting? Is this a way of remembering and keeping in touch with the building's past?
It could be that the school wants to keep a sense of uniformity or pay tribute to the original architecture. It may also just be that it would cost too much to make changes. There's a lot of speculation involved, but we know that the remembrance of the school's architectural history starts with the design depicted in this painting. The school has done a good job of staying connected with its architectural history. The community remembers the building's history through photos, the floor plans, and the information on the school's past. It is evident that the school still feels connected to its past and values its history.
But why does the school do this? Why do they bother to keep these archives and memorialize the building?
I believe it could be because of pride. The school has recorded its architectural history because the school's architecture shows Northern Highlands as a place of higher learning with its modern and brightly lit design. In the pictures we examined, we noticed the school showed its assortment of classes through the uses of specialized rooms in the building. From students practicing typing and learning about space in the planetarium to students taking TVP and lounging in the library. The building is remembered as a symbol of the school's excellence in education. This makes me think that the school's community valued how the building looked because it was the first impression they had about the school.
However, in terms of the structure of the school, I really don't think there's much there that shows the community understanding itself through its history. The only thing that could mean anything is the rock wall, which, although present before the school's construction, could be there for reasons other than being a representation of the past. There also isn't a huge amount of information about the school's design and why specific changes were made and the effects that these changes somehow had on the community, if there were any. To be honest, I don't think that people, whether they were historians, teachers, parents, or students, really paid attention to the architecture of the school.
Students and faculty may not really memorialize the school's architecture because to all of us it seems like just a space where we go to classes and just do schoolwork. But architecture has a very active role in the way we act in an environment.
So jumping off of what you just said, how has the school's architecture played a role in influencing the way students interact and use the spaces that are available to them in the building?
So before we continue with anything, there's a really interesting TED Talk that I found by Mark Kushner that ties into what we're looking at. This part really caught my attention.
So we're just going to dive right in at a complex place, New Jersey. Because 30 years ago, I'm from Jersey, and I was 6, and I lived there in my parents' house in a town called Livingston. And this was my childhood bedroom. Around the corner from my bedroom was the bathroom that I used to share with my sister. And in between my bedroom and the bathroom was a balcony that overlooked the family room. And that's where everyone would hang out and watch TV, so that every time that I walked from my bedroom to the bathroom, everyone would see me. And every time that I took a shower and would come back in a towel, everyone would see me. And I looked like this. I was awkward, insecure, and I hated it. I hated that walk. I hated that balcony, I hated that room, and I hated that house. And that's architecture. Done. That feeling, those emotions that I felt, that's the power of architecture. Because architecture is not about math and it's not about zoning. It's about those visceral, emotional connections that we feel to the places that we occupy. And it's no surprise that we feel that way because according to the EPA, Americans spend 90% of their time indoors. That's 90% of our time surrounded by architecture. That's huge. That means that architecture is shaping us in ways that we didn't even realize.
Mark brings up a really big concept that I like and never really thought of before, which is how has architecture shaped us and to a greater extent history?
Right. The school's architecture has not only shaped how we remember the school, but also how we interact and feel in its environment. The school's architecture and design can trigger certain emotions and actions. There are symbolic associations with the spaces in the school. For instance, some people may view our library as a space to relax, spend time with friends, and others may see it as a space to do homework and study.
Also, maybe the way the spaces in the school are organized could have possibly triggered social patterns and habits to form. I think a great example of this is the cafeteria. In the 1960s, the cafeteria had small tables that could only sit, only a couple of people, which possibly made it easier for students to isolate themselves from each other. And then later on, as the school added on the middle cafeteria and the new cafeteria, it may have further emphasized this idea of separation between students. And now we have the sophomores and freshmen taking the main cafeteria and splitting it down the middle between the two grades, whereas the juniors have the middle cafeteria and the seniors have the new cafeteria.
And adding on to that, this change in the cafeteria design may have also taken an effect on the students. In 2004, the new cafeteria allowed for more space for students to eat lunch, and the layout of the cafeteria may have even changed how students interacted with each other. If we compare photos from 1966 to one from 2006, we see that the cafeteria used to have small tables, which didn't really allow for much interaction. But when the new cafeterias were made, the tables were elongated, which allowed for easier conversations and the ability to accommodate more students.
The library may also be a huge part of the school's architectural history as well, because the area has been revamped and remodeled several times in the past. The bookcases and study spaces have been switched between what is currently the quiet area and the study area. By changing the layout of the library, maybe this changed how students use the space. For instance, Library 4 had a lounge space with armchairs, so maybe students went there more to relax with friends and read books than really to do homework. But nowadays, we have substituted that lounge with the computers, so students may use the space more to do homework instead of an area to relax like the 70s.
Yeah, and that brings me back to what we were mentioning before, how the school's internal design can make us feel. When I first took a tour in the school as a new student, the school felt very different compared to the last high school I studied in. The high ceilings, abundance of natural light, modern design, and simplicity made the school feel refreshing, and I even felt more awake and inspired than any other school because of its design.
And I can say the same. Like when I was in 8th grade and visiting the high school, it felt much more comfortable than my middle school. Maybe that's because I hated Hoyoka's Public and I just got tired of being in that school, but I think the overall design of Highlands did play a part in my feelings when I first entered.
Right, and that also plays a role. How we feel in a specific space, like you felt in your middle school, can lead you to feel the same way if you see a school or building that looks just like it. You and I can feel differently in the school because of what we associate with the school's design. The design and layout of the school triggers different emotions in all of us.
So, what does this say about what we value as a school community?
You know, there are so many values in this community, and the way memory manifests in the form of the school is not clear cut. Everyone has a different experience and memories attached to the building. We don't all remember things the same way. When I see the school, it may prompt memories that are very different from other students. I may see the school as a gleaming gem of my high school years, and I may remember the sunlit hallways, how bright the school looked on summer days, and how the beauty of it all inspired me when I first came in as a new student. But for others, the memory of the school building may trigger some other emotions. Some may see the school as depressing or boxy. So I think we can say that the way Northern Highlands is designed has changed how we perceive what we do in the school and how we feel. This is how we make a history for the school. It's how we utilize the space and remember the space that makes the building's history. We often take for granted the spaces we live and work in because we see the halls and rooms every day. But we have to pay attention to how an environment like our school can shape how we feel, because it changes our behavior and how we interact in these spaces. And even though we weren't able to get to the incentives behind the school's design, we were able to put ourselves in the past through images to come up with what we think were some possible motives behind the style of the school in the individual rooms.
Of course, most of what we said was speculation and what we thought happened based on the little documentation we had, but that's what history is. It's interpreting what is recorded and examining the object itself and filling in the gaps to the best of our ability. There is a fine line between speculation and fact, and it can be hard not to have the two ends merging or going too far to one side. By looking at fact and filling in the gaps with these speculative thoughts, we developed that history. Now, throughout the course of this project, we ran into issues. There just wasn't enough time for us to examine everything. Our research could have easily taken 6 months rather than 6 weeks. We had limits on acquiring the resources, either by having it completely out of our jurisdiction or because we didn't know how to acquire it. And with the information that we did get, how can we really trust it? Mr. Atchison was the only person to give information, but it was information with no grounding. He wasn't here when the school was being founded, constructed, and added on to. So his information can't really be relied on. The book on Allendale was the only thing to mention any sort of history on Highlands, and it was just facts about the school. There's nothing about its design and why those choices were made. Also, half the pictures of the school that we looked at had nothing to do with what we were trying to look at with the building's architecture. In the end, more of the building's past has been lost than recorded, and we don't know why this is. But it's through trying to find out about the past and what is recorded and developing the history of the building that we really get the chance to appreciate what Highlands is as both a physical place and an idea. And I think that's what makes history so fascinating.